Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. In this episode of Hot for Your Health, my good friend and colleague Rebecca Harris teaches you to be strong and courageous. She's talking all about risk-taking and how not to be afraid as you approach the risks that you face in life, in health, and in business.
When I was in high school, my dad and I made a huge ice skating rink in our backyard so that we could charge people to go ice skating. Why did I do that? I don't know. I just thought it would be really cool. He taught me how to read the stock market pages because there was newspaper on the ground, and we built this ice skating rink. We live in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I'm from. So we ended up having a square foot, like 2 by 2. I mean, really small because nothing else froze, and we killed all of my mother's azaleas, like every one of these beautiful bushes. But it was sort of my first foray into starting a business. I went to college. I studied communications at Northwestern University, and after I finished, my dad had really high cholesterol. There's sort of a theme here. So I was like, that's it. I have to make desserts that he can eat, because he used to eat those great Entenmann's brownies, and they all had really high cholesterol. And this was in the late 80s. So what I did was I took the recipe that my mom had for brownies and oatmeal cookies, and I developed no cholesterol brownies and cookies and called them Becky's No Cholesterol Delights. I modeled them after Mrs. Fields. I studied everything Mrs. Fields has done because she was like cookie lady back then. For those of you who remember Mrs. Fields, she was the man or the woman. And there was also a famous Amos, but that was it. Nobody else was doing it. So I went to an industrial bakery, and we actually wrote to Entenmann's. We wrote to Entenmann's and we said, why don't you come up with a no cholesterol brownie and cookie? And Entenmann's wrote us back. I should have saved the letter. And it said, there'll never be a market for no cholesterol desserts. I kind of like sold it on eBay or something. So anyway, I developed these. I sent them to a lab. I had them approved. They did have fat, but they had unsaturated fat. So I worked in an industrial bakery, and I developed Becky's No Cholesterol brownies and cookies. And the problem was with the food industry that you really can't make a lot of money in the food industry unless you have large distribution and shelf space and everything else. But I went around with them, and I did that for a while. He had no cholesterol brownies and cookies for a long time. He really liked those. My husband also liked those because that was great. Because my next product was called the Nettle Knot Protective Pool. Because in the Chesapeake Bay area, you cannot swim. And at that point, we lived out east. My husband was in law school, and this was my next foray. So nettles are jellyfish that are indigenous to the Chesapeake Bay. Well, you can't swim in the Chesapeake Bay in July and August. I'm like, I'm going to fix that. And I think it must be my hard wiring, okay? That is probably part of this. So my dad and I, again, he has a day job. He's a lawyer in St. Louis, Missouri, by the way. So we invented a big net that you could swim in so you wouldn't get stung by jellyfish. And it looks like a cup. It had sides, and you would open it up, and it had floats. And it would pop open, and it would disperse the water and the jellyfish, and it had a bottom, and then all the water would come back in, but the jellyfish couldn't. So what was so cool about this was you could swim jellyfish-free in your Nettle Knot Protective Pool. And I went to sailboat shows, and I went to other motorboat shows, and I would jump in the water, and everybody else was like sweating, and there I was swimming. It was very cool. Problem with that business was it was hard to make a lot of money. They cost a lot to make. We didn't get the profit margin, and at the same time, because there's no such thing as an original idea. Just remember that. There is no such thing as an original idea. Laura Corrett spoke for us at one of our Women Business Leaders Breakfast series at Chatham. She said, do you know how we got Giant Eagle gas stations, the get-go? I'm like, I'm sure you did a huge... She said, no, we did no market study. We did no analysis. We did nothing. My uncle was in St. Louis, Missouri, and there was a Kroger's. He calls my dad. He says, Dad, David, here's the deal. I'm in this parking lot. In this parking lot, they got gas stations. Giant Eagle needs gas stations. That's how they got gas stations. So people take other people's ideas and use them. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about in terms of risk. So that idea didn't really work because somebody else came up with a smaller one at the same exact time. That was tinier. So we moved to Toledo, Ohio. My husband took a teaching job. He's a law professor. He teaches law here. So I had a child. Our first daughter was born. She was colicky from the moment she was born, and she's still screaming, and she's 23 years old. Okay, she's one of those. I mean, what can I say? For those of you who know me, you know her, you know it's true. But she's a great kid. So we moved there. She's 2 months old. He's like, bye-bye. I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So I had seen parent newspapers in other cities, and they existed. This was 1991, and there was no internet. There was no phones, and there was a couple national publications like Chicago Parent and Chicago Parent and New York Apple Parent. So I thought, I gotta start a parent magazine. I gotta do this here in Toledo. I don't know anything about raising kids. I mean, here I have an MBA, and nobody gave me the book for parenting, and I have no family here, and he's gone. Like, he had a great life. He's like, see ya, bye. And this child is screaming nonstop. I mean, it was so awful. So I met another woman. She had a really great life until she met me. That's what I tell everybody. And we ended up going into business. Well, I convinced her to. And she said to me, look, if you can go out and sell a couple ads for this parent magazine, I'll do it with you. But I don't think you can do it. Which is the first sign for somebody who's willing to take risks, because you got to go out, you got to sell. And all of us really need to think about, even if you're not in sales, in some ways you're selling every day. And it's risky because you're putting yourself on the line. And a rejection is a personal rejection, which it really shouldn't be, because you know what? They might just not want your product or service. But we as women take it really personally. So I said, okay, make me a little brochure. I went out with a brochure because then nothing was electronic. And I went to the largest hospital and I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this great parent newspaper. It's going to have calendar events, everything local information. I'm going to distribute 50,000 throughout the city. Will you buy an ad? And so there's a long silence, because here's what women have to do that they don't do. They don't shut up. We just keep talking and talking and talking. And when you take risks and you ask for things, one of the biggest things is we need to listen. We don't listen. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. Here's my product. Here's where I'm going to distribute it. Are you interested? Quiet. Because they have to say something. And she said, this is kind of interesting. I like the target market. I like the niche. In the 1990s, there was more money than God in the 1990s for those of us who were in business then. She said, I'm not going to just buy one full-page ad. I want to buy the back cover for a whole year. I'm like, yeah! So I went back to my partner. I said, okay, let's do it. She's like, I think that was luck. So anybody who takes any risky behavior knows that there's no such thing as, I'm like, okay, no, those are fighting words. So I went out and did it again. Long story short, by 1998, we had turned the company from $750 into $1 million company. We took out an $80,000 loan. I put my name on the loan. I took the risk. I signed away my dog, my mortgage, my husband, my car. I mean, I was just like, I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it's the only way to grow this company.
I'm Jennifer, I'm 40, and I love my Botox.
I love not seeing those lines anymore.
I'm in and out in about 20 minutes.
You can tell there's a glow in their face.
I don't feel 60, I don't look 60, I feel great.
I love it here at the Skin Center.
Bye-bye, crow's feet.
Find your own beautiful at Pennsylvania's #1 Botox provider, the Skin Center, with one of our introductory express offers starting at just $99.
I'm aging beautifully.
The Federal Health Insurance Marketplace is now open. That means you're free to shop for the health plan that's right for you. UPMC Health Plan has some of the most affordable plans on the marketplace. And they all give you full in-network access to UPMC, plus other doctors and hospitals in your community. Visit upmchealthplan.com or call 1-855-297-UPMC to learn why so many people have chosen UPMC Health Plan. Enroll today.
Did I think about all the risks and repercussions and I might lose my house and all that? I don't know if I thought about all that. I just knew that I really had something that was real. We had 25 employees. We had Toledo Area Parent News, Toledo City Paper. We had a baby paper. We started a city paper, and then we had an Ann Arbor paper, and we had a back-to-school fair. They were all monthly. We were making $1 million. We were grossing $1 million, and for those of you who are in business know that grossing is not netting $1 million. That's why I still have a day job today. And in 1999, what happened was my partner and I needed to have a divorce. She stopped thinking the way I was thinking. Our ideas on business were different. And I had to take the risk to get out of that business because I love that business. It was like my baby. But here's the other thing. When you take risks, you also have to take calculated risk. And I knew the internet was on the way. Things were changing. I could not work with her anymore. I was going to buy her out, but we had the company valued, and it was valued at X. She said, no, it's worth 3X, because everybody gets hubris because they think everything we do is worth so much. And you know what? It's not. I mean, what did I have? A few computers and accounts receivable. I didn't even own printing presses. For my good friend Tracy Serto here, she was smart. She has Pop City, and it's all virtual. Yay, Tracy, raise your hand. If you don't go to Pop City, you've got to go to Pop City. But she didn't even have, computers, which it's like cars. You take them out of the box. But I knew I had to get out of the business at all costs. I took the risk of not having that future income stream and the security and losing the title. I was the publisher. That was really cool. And the essence of who I was. And that was a huge risk. But it was a calculated risk because I knew that I could not stay in that business any longer, and I knew what the future of it held. The good news is I sold my half of the company. I got a little bit of money. I put some money away for my kids, but not a lot. That's why I'm still working today. And she's still running them, which is really important because none of us are indispensable. Any entity should continue to run without any of us there because we should be able to have somebody else come in and train them and work with them so we can go on and take other risks. So I give you that background because I think I'm a person who's taken a lot of risks in my life. But I think they've been calculated risk as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about a few other basic things, and then we're going to have a discussion. Okay. First of all, what do you think about this study? This says women with much more testosterone take risks, and a lot more risk than women that don't have testosterone. So the one thing we could all do is ask Vonda to just shoot us up with testosterone today, and we would be great, okay? Let's ask her if she'll do that. Somebody go get Vonda. There was a study done with a bunch of MBAs at a university, and what they asked everybody to do was to continue to take and exhibit risky behavior through a gambling process. And as you went further and further along, who dropped out, who continued to go along, you had to put some money into it. It wasn't going to break the bank. Then they swabbed everybody's mouth, who went all the way up. And the people with the most amount of testosterone, the women, were the ones who went further. They're also the women who went into finance, because they had the brain to do that and were able to take on some of that risky behavior. So I think when we think about risks, though, and when I think about risks, I think about calculated risks. A lot of times when you read in the media about risks, you're reading about risky behavior. And I wanted to really differentiate that, and I think that that's important to think about. So when I talked earlier, I talked about why women aren't making it to the top. I'm going to talk about a few things that I think are important, and this gets to taking risks in life and health and in business. Women, if you own companies, you're not borrowing, you're not hiring enough people, you're not growing your companies, you're multitasking. And this can apply to if you're in a company, and I call those of you who are in companies entrepreneurs. You think and act entrepreneurially within the confines of an existing organization. If you're at PNC or if you're at UPMC, don't tell me that you're not an entrepreneur. You have projects, you have budgets, you might have staff. You got to do something really great today, and what you did today is not going to be good enough for tomorrow. So that really, in some ways, is an entrepreneur, and there is no guarantee that you're going to be here tomorrow. That is an entrepreneur for you. Now, you might not have an SBA loan, but you're sure acting entrepreneurially, and that's the Google model. Entrepreneurship, Steve Jobs came out with that in 1984. He said, I want everybody in my company to think and act like an entrepreneur, and I'm calling you entrepreneurs, because I expect you to have that kind of brain power, and I expect you to take those kind of risks. So here's the other thing about women. Women have lower confidence in regard to their careers, and a lot of the studies that I cite are all ones that if you want the data and the links, I'm happy to give to you. These are not things I'm making up, okay? So I'm not just saying that we have lower confidence. These are studies that have been done. Men are more confident across all age groups. with 70% of men from this study having high or very high levels of self-confidence compared to 50% of the women surveyed. Half the women who were surveyed in this study admitted to feelings of self-doubt about their performance and their career, but only 30% of the men reported that. This is great. There's a job that was open, and in this study, 20% of the men said that they would apply for this job even though they weren't prepared. They're like, it's a job, I can do that, even though they could not do it. They didn't. Only 14% of the women said they would. I gotta get more ready for it. I mean, how long are we gonna get ready for it? You know, are we gonna just take our whole lives to get ready for it? Like, sometimes you just have to do it. So, women are overly modest. Men will take public credit for everything, even if they haven't done it. I mean, honestly, right? So here's the thing, I'm at Chatham University, and I realized when I first got there, this is a very big campus. I mean, it's small but big, but there's 300 people. So I started to send what I had done to our president and the vice president, because if I don't tell them what I've done, who is going to tell them what I've done? And you might have quarterly reviews and all that kind of stuff, but you know, and I'm not telling them every day, but every few weeks if something big came up, I told them what I did. Because if I don't tell them what I do, who's going to tell them what I do? Women do not ask. Women fail to get promoted because they fail to step up and apply. They think they're not ready, or they think they'll be asked for that job. Men will ask for any job there is and ask for an increase in salary, even if it's not really due. So the next time you negotiate your salary for anything, don't accept what they say. Women make $500,000 less over the course of their lifetime because they don't negotiate their first salary. And every other salary is based on your first salary. So if somebody says $100,000, wouldn't that be nice? You say, I'm going to think about it. And then you shut up. Just stop talking. And you go home, and you think, and you talk, and you think. Because if they really want you, they're not going to offer the job to somebody else. And if they do offer it to somebody else in the 24 hours that you say that you need, do you really want to work there anyway?
Thank you so much for joining me this week for this episode of Hot for Your Health. You know, you are a powerful force in your own health, and I'm excited that you took the time this Thursday to learn more from our nation's authorities in health. I hope that you subscribe so that you don't miss one single episode. Join us next week for Hot for Your Health. And for more information, find it at womenshealthconversations.com.